Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this overview lesson about manifest destiny. This is part 4 of 4 Nomia lessons about this general topic in this time period. Before I get going into the nitty-gritty, I want to make sure you have a sense of the key ideas we're going to talk about in this presentation. We're going to talk about the justification for and the definition of manifest destiny. We're going to talk about President James K. Polk specifically. We're going to discuss the annexation of Texas and the Mexican-American War. But first, I want to start out with a painting that really epitomizes, that really symbolizes what manifest destiny meant to people of the time period. In front of you, you see a painting by John Gast. It's called American Progress, and it was produced in approximately 1872. I want you to take a second and just stare at it. Feel free to pause the video and take a look around. And I just want you to get a sense get an opinion about this piece. While you're doing that, I want you to keep the following questions in mind. Okay, and they're going to pop up in just a second. And there they are. What objects do you see? What are people doing? What do you feel when you look at this painting? And what does the use of color and shadow tell you about this piece? So I want you to just take a minute, pause the video, stare at this, and think about these questions for a minute and jot down your observations. We're going to revisit this painting in a few minutes in this presentation. The term manifest destiny was actually first used in 1845 by this journalist named John O'Sullivan. All right, and initially it was used to describe the desire of U.S. to expand westward. Now, historians use it to talk about the actual expansion of the United States into the Western territories and the addition of new states as we continue to expand. Now, there are a couple of key ideas I want you to keep in mind with manifest destiny. During this time period, Americans felt that it was our duty to spread democracy across the continent. We felt it was our fate to move westward. We needed more land for a growing population in the East. And all of this was according to and supported by God. So this drive to go west was both manifest, obvious, and certain. It was our destiny. It was our fate to move forward. So this is the basic concept behind manifest destiny. The things like the Trail of Tears, the relocation of Indians, the confiscation of various property, the Mexican-American War, which we're going to talk about, the annexation of Texas, all of these things were driven by this desire of the United States to move west. And you need to remember these key justifications because these are very, very important. These were the driving factors behind our westward expansion. Okay, now that you've had a few minutes to look at the painting and that we know what manifest destiny is, I want you to take a closer look. Take a look at your observations that you made before we really knew what manifest destiny was, and now kind of rethink your observations based on our definition of manifest destiny. There are a couple of things here I want to draw your attention to. Number one, this figure here. This figure is Columbia, and she represents the United States itself moving westward. She's holding a telegraph wire. You can see the telegraph wires right here, and you can see them following all the way up to her hand, right? So she's carrying technology with her. We're bringing the advancements and intelligence and just wonderfulness of America west. You see horse-drawn carriages there. You see the railroad in the background. You see the building of canals and transportation back there, right? And it's light. It's very light on the right side of the painting, emphasizing goodness and positivity. And as you move west, when you look on the left-hand side of the painting, it's dark. There's a lot of shadow, emphasizing that it's backward and needs to be fixed, right? So what you see the pioneers down here starting to bring that progress to the west. You see herds of animals running away, and you see the Indians running as well. We are literally chasing them away from the light. We're forcing the light into the west and bringing it out of the darkness. This is the idea that people had about manifest destiny. It was America's purpose to spread our way of life because our way of life was the best and other people needed to adopt it. And our goal was to spread that. And this whole painting really shows this visually, does a fantastic job of really symbolizing and epitomizing how people at the time period felt about manifest destiny. All right, folks, it is time to meet Mr. Manifest Destiny himself, President James K. Polk. This is a nickname, I suppose you could say, that historians over time have bestowed upon President Polk because of his exceedingly pro-expansionist ideas. He was going to conquer the rest of the continent by any means necessary. It was annexation of Texas, get all of Oregon, get Mexico to cede a bunch of land, or bust. Like, he was going to make this happen. And he was a Democrat. He was a protege of Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson's nickname was Old Hickory. Well, James K. Polk's nickname was Young Hickory. He was way more expansionist than Jackson, and he definitely accomplished his goals. He would strong arm if necessary. I'm going to talk about the annexation of Texas and the Mexican-American War on a couple of other slides. The Oregon dispute involved Great Britain for the most part. We were still trying to settle the Oregon Territory, and this had been settling boundary issues with Great Britain had been a problem since the Revolutionary War. They were never fully settled. But Great Britain was having issues of its own, and it really didn't want to get into a war either. So eventually we were able to broker an agreement that allowed us to get out of it relatively unscathed, which was always good times. So we were able to settle the Oregon dispute, and we managed to get a hold of the Oregon Territory, and Britain finally went away for a while. James K. Polk was elected in the election of 1844. He's so important because during his presidency, we got so much more land. We also got California, which is pretty important. So he was very successful at getting done what he wanted done. So that's why he's so famous. He is Mr. Manifest Destiny, obsessively pro-expansionist, and he did accomplish all of his goals for expansion. Okay, so the story of Texas is extremely fascinating. Now, I don't have time to go into all the nitty-gritty details, but I'm going to give you the Cliff's Notes big picture version. All right, let's start with talking about the three different phases of Texas. Okay, now, at first, Texas was part of Mexico. Okay, and so while they were part of Mexico, they really didn't, that's a pre-phase, if you will. The phases I'm talking about are when it directly involves the United States, really. So in 1836, Texas becomes its own independent republic, and it separates from Mexico and declares independence. So until 1845, when it officially becomes part of the United States as a territory, it is its own country. It engages in treaties. Britain and France formally recognized it as an independent nation. It was trading cotton with them, which was kind of a problem for the Southerners of the United States proper. So between those years, about 9 years, it was its own country. And then we finally annexed it in 1845, and then in 1850 it becomes an official state. So that's a big picture, three phases of Texas. But let me talk a little bit about how it got to that point. So once Mexico declared independence from Spain, it had all this land that it wanted to make sure it was able to retain control and that it was able to settle. So it welcomed American settlers initially. But Americans were pretty greedy. We were lusting after land like nobody's business, as I hope you understand with the whole Manifest Destiny thing. So we're like, oh great, you said we could come, we're totally crashing the party. So a few people didn't come. Within a few years, you had more Americans than Mexicans in Texas. So at that point, the Mexicans started to get a little nervous, thinking, wait a second, this is kind of becoming part of the United States. So a battle ensues, and this is where the famous story of the Alamo comes in. Santa Anna, who's in control of the territory at the time, this gentleman, Santa Anna, he actually attempts to drive the Americans out. So he attacks the Alamo. After a prolonged battle, the Americans succumb. All right, he actually ends up killing everybody, and it's a very famous battle. I encourage you to go and look it up in other places, maybe find another video. So after that, the Americans are really ticked off. It was a major, major battle cry, and Sam Houston, who would become the president of the Republic of Texas, and also obviously has Houston, Texas is named for him, he ends up launching a counterattack and winds up capturing Santa Anna and forcing him to surrender. When that surrender is forced, that's when Texas officially separates from Mexico and becomes its own independent territory. Now, as soon as it became its own independent territory, it adopted a Congress, it adopted a constitution, and it very quickly drafted a request to be annexed by the United States. It would take some time for that annexation to occur because politicians in the United States were concerned about maintaining the balance of slave and free states. Remember, at this time, things are very tense. The North and South are not getting along. People are very concerned. Should we be slaves? Should we be free? How is this going to work out? And Texas was mostly slave because of all the fertile farmland. There were a lot of plantations there for cotton specifically. So it was very slave heavy. So a lot of politicians didn't want to wade into that problem, so they left Texas alone for quite some time until it became an issue later on in the campaign of an election of 1845, and it would become a territory of the United States at that point, and then an official state in 1850. Okay, so the Mexican-American War is intimately connected to the annexation of Texas, mainly because the Mexicans did not recognize that annexation. They did not recognize that it was now a part of the United States. They didn't recognize that it declared independence in the first place. So they fully rejected all of those claims that had been in existence for quite some time. The Mexican-American War was fought between 1846 and 1848. The United States was victorious, just to give you the big picture. And with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, we got tons of territory. Basically, we got the entire American Southwest. That's what we got, including California. We got all of Texas, Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, Nevada, Arizona, all those states, New Mexico. That was all part of that territory that we received in the Mexican-American War. So now I want to bring up a graphic just to give you a nice play-by-play of how this war really played out. So you see here, we have a nice breakdown of causes, the events of the war, and the settlement. So a key cause, like I just stated, was that Mexico rejected anything that involved Texas being an independent state or being part of the United States. And once that occurred, that annexation, they cut off diplomatic relations, so this caused problems. We did send a diplomat, this gentleman named John Slidell, to Mexico to try to work out an agreement, but the Mexicans were like, forget it. We don't want any part of this. Texas is ours. Get out of here. Now, Slidell actually wanted to purchase it. He wanted to buy it. We were willing to buy it and not fight, but Mexicans, understandably, they consider it their territory, so they were like, no, you're not taking this. This is ours. So Polk, because he's Mr. Manifest Destiny and he wants all the land in the world, he decided he was going to put troops on the border in Louisiana on alert in hopes of taunting the Mexican soldiers so that they would attack. That was the goal. He wanted to pick a fight because he knew that if he picked a fight, that somebody eventually would pick back. And they did. Mexican soldiers did attack a small group of Americans, and they killed 11 and captured the rest. And Polk knew as soon as that happened, he could get a declaration of war, which he did on May 13th. So now we have the war with Mexico happening. So we fight the war, several different battles. We basically kicked their butt for most of them. We had a much stronger military than they did. And at the end of the day, we were able to work out an agreement. That was the 1848 signing of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. We got New Mexico and California for $15 million, and in total, we gained 500,000 square miles of territory. So that was a big, big deal. The big picture significance is that we got all that territory. I mean, it's insane. It really increased the size of our country and allowed us to expand all the way westward. California was really, really key because in 1848, the gold rush starts, and now all of a sudden you've got a whole new group of folks who are going out there to try to make it rich at the start of the gold rush. So what did we learn? Well, we learned about Manifest Destiny. We learned what it was, what it's all about, what the justifications for it were. We also learned a little bit about art critiquing, and we broke apart this painting here to try to understand the sentiment, the feelings of the time about how Americans felt about Manifest Destiny and why they were so in favor of it. We learned about James K. Polk specifically and how he was Mr. Manifest Destiny, very pro-expansionist, and would stop at almost nothing to increase the size of the country. We learned about the annexation of Texas and how it had a few different phases of existence, and it actually started out as an independent republic before it became part of the United States. We learned that that incident actually caused problems with Mexico, which eventually erupted in the Mexican-American War. However, President Polk picked that fight on purpose because he wanted to make sure that we expanded our territory. And we did. We were able to expand all the way to the Pacific Ocean, and that's the key significance of the Mexican-American War. I hope this lesson was useful to you, and I will see you next time.